Hi everyone, welcome to Living La Vita Local Podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. My name is Fazz.
My name is Rich.
My name is Rich.
That
was nice, yeah, it was jolly. So we are doing a bit of a shorter pod this week after giving you a bit of a mammoth one last week. And we are looking at our PSPs and PS Vitas again. Not done that for a little while. Certainly, we kind of shared the responsibility last time with the PlayStation Battle Royale on the Vita. But this time around, we've picked our own poisons, and you still looked for the Vita. I kind of said that you could if you wanted to play some PSP games. You're like, no.
And in the fullness of time, I will.
But you picked an interesting one.
I have unfinished business.
Oh, really?
This is why I picked it.
Oh, right, cool. Is it an augmented reality game?
It is. I'm going to be talking about cliff diving.
Mr. Cliff Diving.
Mr. Cliff Diving. That would have been the shout.
And I've got a bit of unfinished business, actually. That's a good segue. Mine's I've been playing Resistance Retribution. And I had a bit of unfinished business with the Resistance series.
Oh, there you go. Be honest.
So, yeah. Good theme.
2-year anniversary goes, and here we are with unfinished business.
Vengeance.
The podcast.
I've got retribution to be had.
Well, there you go.
Someone needs to be retributed.
Workshop that.
Do you want to go first?
Sure, why not?
Cool.
So it dawned on me that for 2 years of talking about video games and PS Vita and PSP stuff, and basically slagging off most of the Vita's hardware features, augmented reality was one that I had yet to shit on from a great height.
Yet.
So here we are.
Is that one of the benefits of being a cliff diver that you can just ship out? You can just shit
I suppose it would be an option. Basically, when one bought their Vita new, it would come with a set of augmented reality cards. So you could pop it on a flat surface, point your camera at it, and there would be some games that you could muck about with. So I think, and this is off the top of my head, I've not re-downloaded anything, because I couldn't be bothered. But you would have things like, I think there was a fireworks display type thing, or you could set up like a little football stadium type pitch thing. I ended up going into cliff diving because from what I could remember of playing them before, it felt like the closest to an actual game.
Yeah.
It's, kind of not.
Sorry, I'm still laughing because I called him Mr. Cliff Diving and then you said you went into him and I was just like,
oh funny. Yes. That's very mature. Basically, you would put your card on the table, and out from the card, everything would kind of fall away around this card, and out from it would rise a cliff that your character could basically chuck himself off into a pool of water. And the idea is you do different dives. Okay. So it's mainly timing based, right? So you have a couple of tutorial ones where it kind of starts you off easy. But once it's sort of put all the mechanics in place, what you're effectively doing is holding your Vita, pointing it at a card on a table, pressing the rear touchpad to a rhythm of your character's heartbeat to get his adrenaline up.
Got it. Yeah.
Then he goes running towards the edge of the cliff. You press the button to jump, and with the right timing, when he gets to kind of a green spot on the cliff, and then depending on the dive you've chosen, he will go through a series of rings that will change different colours as you go with a button prompt. Yeah. So say X and then triangle, then circle, and the idea is that you have to try and time your button presses to coincide with each of those rings going green as you go through them to do different parts of the dive. And then assuming when you were up on the cliff and you got to that green point, you held the button down long enough to actually reach the pool, you will land safely in the pool. Dive will be over, you will get some money.
Just people throwing money at you.
Jumping off of high things. And that'll be that. And you move on to the next dive, which will be slightly more complicated. Lather, rinse, repeat. So where the kind of wrangles in the gameplay come from are if you fail the dive by like either missing the pool completely or just like some of the spills look really dangerous, like actually painful.
There's blood on your table,
little cartoon character guy just like getting utterly ruined, and then you have to pay his hospital bills. And
got that money though, so it's okay. From the successful dives, so
exactly. It's okay. And so there is a bit of a loop to it, right? There's not a heck of a lot of cliffs. I think there's maybe 6 or so. There were some downloadable content ones. You could also like create your own, which is a little bit of a fib because
you couldn't.
It'll just look like a basic platform. The bit you'll be creating is where the pool is, like how far away from the platform and how big the pool is, because you kind of use the touchpad to like stretch out the size of the pool. But it will still look the same, or it'll be kind of generic. But it did mean that, you know, if you wanted to make it look like your guy had jumped from, I don't know, a pile of books into a mug or something like that, you could kind of make it look like that.
Oh, okay.
Which is kind of cool, but once you've done that once, you've done that, then there's no real need to do it ever again. And the problem I found with all of it is the technical side of things. So, like, the tracking on the augmented reality bits would be fine, but a little bit finicky, and it would sometimes suddenly lose track of what's going on, or things might jitter and stuff like that. It wouldn't necessarily be terribly smooth. The gameplay is fine. It's basically QuickTime events, the game. But I could see why it would be a bit of a distraction. And for me, the biggest problem, though, is the fact that because it's an augmented reality thing, the idea is that you are pointing your Vita like at the card, so it knew what was where.
Oh, you're not portable, are you?
No, like you can move around it. But if you were like, say you were sat in the wrong place when it registered where the card was, it's not like you could really look up the cliff and kind of see where you were standing.
Oh, really?
Because it would lose track of where the card was.
Okay.
So, like, you had to kind of find your sweet spot for it and then kind of not move, which when you're having to press the rear touchpad in time with a heartbeat and then press a load of button prompts is not ideal, because you are going to move a little bit. Like, only a little bit, but unfortunately it doesn't take much to knock the tracking of the card off. So, yeah, it's kind of a nice idea. Execution's kind of sloppy, but it kind of brings me back round to that classic thing that we've said about the Vita for a long time now, of like, did we really need this? Did we really? Like,
yeah.
And it's kind of cool that it can do it, and if you take it as a tech demo rather than a game, then yeah, sure, all right, it's kind of impressive. But I just think that they were trying to compete against phones and stuff like that a bit too much by throwing too much stuff at it. And it just dawned on me the other day, and the reason that I wanted to talk about it now on the kind of 2-year anniversary of the podcast is that it finally frigging dawned on me that, like, my big problem with the Vita is that it just never had the focus that the PSP did. Yeah. Like, the PSP did a few things and did them well. The Vita felt like it was just trying to do too much stuff, and it just never did any of it quite as well as it could. And I think it came through in, like, everything that it did.
I love that our podcast is called Living La Vita Loca, and
I relentlessly dunk on the Vita.
Yeah, I love it so much.
I think for me, it is probably, the more I talk about it and the more I think about it, the more I think it genuinely might be one of the most frustrating consoles I've ever come across. Because, like, there was so much potential there, and the PSP was such a great starting point for building and doing something cool, and it just feels like there's so much unfulfilled potential. There's so many curious decisions that the more I think about it, the more I'm like, well, why? And it's frustrating. It is really frustrating. But then you fast forward to something like the PlayStation Portal, and, like, sure, I know I talk a lot of rubbish about, like, streaming and all that kind of stuff, but, like, credit where credit's due, at least that's focused.
Yeah.
You know, at least that is a focused device, and it's doing the job that it is designed to do.
Just do the thing. Just do the thing.
Whereas the Vita, like, kind of does that, but definitely kind of doesn't. And,
I think, like you say, it just kind of got lost in the wash, didn't it, with the mobile phone situation? And you kind of think that the PSP was so well received for its, like, media capabilities and stuff. Like, it's funny because I still see on Reddit or Instagram and things where people, like, hundreds of likes on posts where it's like, I've took this photo with my PSP, and everyone's like, oh my god, amazing, but you never see anyone out doing it with a Vita. Like, so,
Yeah,
you know,
like,
if you do it, you'd be like, oh, look at me with my Vita, it would be like, you know, tumbleweed.
But I genuinely think the best thing that the Vita ever did was let you play PSP games with 2 analog sticks.
Yeah.
Genuinely, that is the trick.
Yeah.
Like, all of my favourite Vita things are PSP games. You know, like, and that's not a good state of affairs for a console.
I mean, I'm going to get into a little bit of sort of PSP controls in my review, but yeah, I think that the fact that it's indicative that I've got a PS Vita sat at home and I've not really used it for anything like Vita specific. I've used it for PSP games, I've used it for PS1 games. Do you know what I mean? But then there's nothing, and the pool of games to review is smaller now because obviously we've been through so many in the last couple of years, but at the same time there are still loads of games there that I could play, and I just kind of look at it and go, you know, and then I just pick up my Logitech or I pick up my PSP or I just kind of go, oh, this is more, you know, where I want to be. And that is, it's sad, but at the same time, you know, I do love seeing people on social media. There's a chap called Lee Gamer UK that I've just started following recently, and he's got this lovely block wall of lots of physical PS Vita games, and then he'll put PSP Vita in front of it, and like, for example, even just this evening I was liking a post where he had the Vita with a grip on it, and he was saying, I absolutely love, you know, Uncharted Golden Abyss, and that gave me fond memories of the start of our podcast, where I was like, you know, and I was like, yeah, that's, you know, that's the Vita at its best, and for us that was still like a 7 out of 10 game, and I don't, you know, it was good, like really good, but that was almost like, is that the Vita at its best? I was sort of thinking favourite part of Vita is when it's a little bit weird and kooky and it has Papers, Please, Hatful Boyfriend,
like as an indie machine,
as
an indie machine, and a way of playing PlayStation 1 games on the go, and PSP games with 2 analog sticks. Like, as a whole package, there's a lot to like, but there's some pretty big caveats with that, and a lot of the Vita games themselves just didn't really fire on as many cylinders for me. And I mean, an easy example would be the Ridge Racer thing, where Ridge Racer on PSP versus the Vita, and I would always go for the PSP option instead of the Vita, and things like that, where you know, it brought all this stuff together, and that was cool. But at the same time, imagine what we could have had if there was just a little bit more focus, and instead of having the rear touchpad and the AR stuff, they were just like, okay, well, what if we made it so that, you know, we do a slightly different setup with the physical media, or put a bit more oomph under the bonnet, or, you know, there's just a lot of what ifs and maybes that they could have done, or things that they could have tweaked, that I'm sure, like, you know, people will debate, or they'll just, you know, just go buy a PSP instead.
I'm going to be honest, that the one thing that I would say that I'm looking forward to doing more in the future, comparative to not being able to do on the PSP, is playing a lot of the PlayStation 3 like HD collections, or things like Sly Cooper, Ratchet and Clank, you know, that is in the things that they've kind of brought over to the Vita, that is effectively that game from the PlayStation 3 era, on the
Shrunk
go.
down.
So, and I remember when you said about Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, and you're like, you know, how have they done such an amazing job, and that being on the Vita, that's the kind of thing that I think that they can't live by it. You can't live. That isn't everything the console should have been about. But certainly they've got some good examples on there that I'm looking forward to kind of dabbling with at some point, where you couldn't do that on the PSP. But on the flip side of that, the PSP does a hell of a lot of things that, you know, isn't that you kind of think they wish the Vita would have been more about, and they had that focus, like you said. So
and I think for me, like this cliff diving thing is a good example of that kind of. Well, the kind of core experience should have been a bit different, rather than, like, I think in my kind of perfect console for the time, something like cliff diving wouldn't even factor into the equation, you know? Like, With all due respect to cliff diving,
who's
the
thinking
people
of that?
that made
Who
it,
sat there? Which video game developer is sitting there going, "Can't wait to do augmented reality cliff diving"? Like, as in, that's the thing I got into video game development for. Like, as in,
that's the thing.
Somebody is obviously, but.
As a piece of tech and a showpiece, like, sure, it's kind of cool, it's kind of diverting, but at the same time, like, it's just kind of there. So I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10, and I think, to be honest with you, that's kind of being a little bit generous.
That's generous.
But it's not fundamentally broken in and of itself. It's just a bit fiddly and a bit
To be playing it and you're doing it, you're doing it on a portable device, and I know. In theory, you are then, saying, well, I want to play this augmented reality game, I have to have the card. You are tying yourself to that, but to have it be finicky even then is annoying.
That is a point about the cards, though, because I think you can still download and print the cards.
All right, okay.
So it's not like you have to go on eBay or something like that to track them down. I think you can get printable ones.
Yeah, because I've got, is it the iToy maybe for the PS3, and there's like an iPet game you can get, but... Like, every time you try and get an iPad game now, you have to have the card, but the card doesn't come... Like, no one ever has the card anymore for it. It seems to have gone missing. So, that's interesting. But it's good that that's the case. Okay, so... there's loads of points there that you made that are really, really good for the review that I've got here in terms of the relationship between, say, the PSP and the PS3, controls. So, yeah, you'll see... segues everywhere. You can shout them up if you want to. So, Resistance Retribution. So, this is from 2009, and it's really funny because you remember I always say about PSP games having a real... Every time I look at them, I'm like, this is a good one, and this is from 2009. So this game's the first time when I've researched it, I found that there was a real drive from Sony to revive the PSP in 2009.
Oh, funny that.
Yeah, no. How weird that all these games came out.
Knew?
Yeah, we're going to actually support the console. So, yeah, they were like, I think... Obviously, they were quite happy with what they had and knew they had a good console, but they just weren't happy with the sales they were getting on it, so they were really trying to drive it. And this was the first time I kind of found that information out. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So
explains a lot.
Yeah, so this came out just after Resistance 2 on the PlayStation 3, maybe like 4 or 5 months after it, but it is set between 2 and 1. And that's kind of a bit of a PSP sort of trope where it's like, and it's a side story, so it's not part of the main story, which it never will be. But definitely a trope for the PSP is almost like, let's take our best sort of PS2, PS3, like genres and games that we've got on there, and then stick them on the PSP, make them a bit of a shorter version of them, and almost try and make it so that it works on the PSP. Remember Killzone Liberation?
Yeah.
Give that a 6 out of 10 last year. It was our 6 out of 10 game of the year. And that was a PlayStation exclusive first-person shooter trilogy. Resistance is a Sony exclusive first-person trilogy shooter made into third person. So clearly they'd kind of got the idea by this point to be like, right, okay, there's only one way to make a first-person shooter work. Don't make it a first-person shooter anymore.
We've got the blueprint.
Yeah, so this was ported, not ported at all, made by Bend Studios of Siphon Filter, Uncharted Golden Abyss, Segway, and Days Gone, most recently. And the original trilogy was made by Insomniac Games, Spyro, Ratchet and Clank, and Spider-Man, like the most recent Marvel Spider-Mans. Yeah. So really good hands all around, basically. I've got really good, and I've already spoken about it in the podcast a little bit before, really fond memories of Resistance Fall of Man, the first one. You can get them all on PS Plus Premium to stream, so you can't actually download them, but you can stream it, and it's not really well advertised. I kind of stumbled across it as I was getting Retribution. So I have Retribution on the PSP, and I also noticed that it was there on PS Premium. There's a reason that I tried both, and I'll come back to that in a second. But it was just interesting that Resistance is there. I don't know how well loved Resistance is as a trilogy. You don't see it very often. People kind of go, oh, it's absolutely incredible. But I loved Resistance Fall of Man. It was just like one of those formative PS3 experiences for me. Yeah. And one thing that I remember vividly is being in second year university, and we used to always cram into my bedroom to play Resistance. And it was to play multiplayer, but you could only play single player multiplayer, like in server, like take turns, which is fine. It would have been obviously better if you could have played co-op and things, but you couldn't. But it was such a good game, and I had the internet connection in my room, Ethernet cable in, so it was like everyone just piled in my room to play, which was great. Until when I went out to do one of my shifts at McDonald's on Halloween, and my 3 mates were sat there drinking and going, all right, yeah, and I was like really jealous of them anyway, because I was like, right, well, you're all just sitting playing PlayStation and going out tonight. It's Halloween, you're going to get absolutely hammered. I'm going to go to work, and it's going to be really busy, and people are going to be pissed, having a great time. Sort of 9 hours later, I come back home, and my room effectively trashed, covered in blue and red paint, and as in they hadn't done it on purpose, they'd just been pissed. But my best friends that I lived with had effectively just ruined my room, and I had paint all over my clothes and my bed and everything like that. So they come home about an hour later, and I was furious. Like, one of the times in my life where I've completely and truly lost it. Yeah. And I was chasing them down the street with an empty bottle of like vodka they must have drank, and I threw it at them down the street, and they were like running for their lives. And I was like, "Don't you fucking come back here tonight?
You're sleeping on the sofa."
I think I kind of calmed down a little bit within the next hour, but still, I was like, The reason that kind of came to mind was just because the reason that happened is because we all used to just pile my route and play Resistance. Yeah. Everyone loved it for a little while. So yeah, I don't know, that
fond memories.
That kind of came up from somewhere. Anywho, so the reason I went on to try and play Retribution on PS Premium is because I'd kind of read somewhere that you could connect it to Resistance 2, and there was actually a PS Plus sort of version of the controls, and I was like, that's interesting. Okay. So I started playing on the PSP, and when I started researching about it, it's like, oh, do you know that you could play Retribution on your PlayStation 3 you could plug it in via the AV,
right?
And actually you then played the game, but you would play on your PS3 controller and have better controls. And I was like, oh, good, I can have 2 analog sticks, brilliant. So I did that instead, and that felt like definitely the definitive way to do that. That said, the PSP way of doing it was that you still had the odd sensation of having your analog stick moving your head around, and then the face buttons being able to see and look in different directions, as was always the case with sort of FPSs, and this version be the third person. But they decided to do a bit of an auto aim situation, whereas like basically like the auto aim was like an auto cover as well. So you would run towards a wall and it would auto cover for you.
Right.
They both worked really, really well. And actually I was a bit like, am I more into the PSP controls and playing on a PSP, or am I into playing with, I guess, the advanced inverted commas controls that they gave you? And I think that you noticed a massive difference in the difficulty of the game from the point of view that if you were playing on the PSP, it seemed to be much easier because it would just snap to the next enemy for you effectively. And I think the way they kind of made that work was the enemies are just massive bullet sponges, so you'd just be shooting them for ages, and it'd be like, oh, but you're aiming at them for free, mate. And it's just like, it was a bit of a strange one. I think in the end, the preference always is to have that second analog stick. So, I played most of this through on PS Plus Premium, and I would definitely suggest anybody, if they're going to go back and play this, if you are a lover of the Resistance trilogy, like myself, like I've only played 1 and 2. I didn't play 3, and I really enjoyed 1. 2's okay, but I do like it as a whole. Then I would recommend, if you've never played this, I think that whilst it doesn't form an integral part to the whole of the trilogy, if you do like that world, and I will go into that in a little bit, that is in, it's definitely worth going back to this and going through PS Plus Premium and playing it on analog. There's another cool sort of feature that you could do if you linked your PSP. I didn't do this because I couldn't, but with Resistance 2, and this is about a good thing about talk about compatibility. We were talking about with the Vita. Yeah. The PSP, you could infect your PSP. Now in the first game, you play as Nathan Hale, I think his name is, and he is infected by the Chimera alien force, who come to Earth, they invade Earth. And this is the same story for the PSP game, so it's a quasi alternate World War II situation. So World War II doesn't happen. The Chimera land in Russia and invade into Europe.
Right.
And you basically, the Allied forces effectively now driving off this alien force who come and infect humans, take them away and turn them into these Chimera monsters. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you could infect your PSP, which meant that you could turn the main character in this game, James Grayson, who isn't infected, you could infect him. Right. And it gives you an alternate reality version of Resistance Retribution. Oh. It gives you it doesn't change it completely, but it gives you a bit of a different story. It gives you different abilities. So for example, Nathan Hale in the first game, he auto heals because he's a Chimera, which is a great way of getting around that.
Yeah, that's pretty handy.
Whereas in this game, like, you notice that James Grayson, he picks up a liberal amount of health. They are literally everywhere, because obviously they never really thought about it. I think they were just like, oh, with the first guy, he just healed himself, and now we're going to have to heal this person. Oh, it's fucking everywhere. This red goo that you just pick up in a vial. But if you infect your PSP, he can then just auto heal, which is really cool. Right. So and you get different weapons and things. So it was cool that they thought about that. And again, the integration, they were like, right, we're going to give you better controls. If you could do it with the analog stick, we understand PSP isn't the best necessarily way of doing that, and also we're going to give you this different way of doing it as well. Cynical. Sell more of one thing, sell more of another thing. But at least they did it, though.
At least they thought to try it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in terms of story then, you're a chap called, this is where the revenge comes in, Rich, the big revenge. You're a chap called James Grayson, and you find out very quickly that his brother has been turned into a Chimera, or he's turned into a Chimera, and you discover him at one of their Chimera bases, and where they are, what they're called again, their conversion facilities, where they're converting humans into these alien monsters, and he has to kill him. He basically has to finish him off, and then he kind of like becomes a bit of a renegade,
right?
And he's going to be sentenced to death because he's just become, you know how it is, just become too renegades,
too much renegade.
Yeah, exactly. Just too much of a badass, really. Just killing too many Chimera, if you will. But then he's kind of saved by almost like I guess it's a French resistance, so they call the Marquis, and it's almost like, but it's a whole European resistance,
right?
And they're, as always the sort of case, they're kind of not necessarily super like the Suicide Squad, but like, right, we're going to send you in, and we need you to kind of go and do this really important job where we've heard there might be a serum kicking around in mainland Europe. You come with us, or you can, be sentenced to death. All right, yeah, I'll come with you, right, kind of thing. And everyone's like, oh, this guy, can't trust him and stuff. And there's a lot of xenophobia in this game. Like, it's really ham-fisted with it. Like, as in,
really?
It's not that long ago. Like, as in, it's like, how long is this game now? It's 16 years old, and it's almost like, it was like, is this like the 70s? Like, it's like, it was so weird. Like, as in the hatred between the French and the British people in it, and I was like, are they playing this up? Is this on purpose? Is this a thing that they're doing to show that might have actually genuinely happened in the World War if everything had gone a bit different? Because it was just so rote, and it was weird. I didn't like it. I wanted us all to be friends, and we weren't being friends, and we were all on the same side, but no one was being comrades, Rich. It was, but then the revenge, there's so much revenge to be had from everybody. Everyone needed revenge, so...
Not more revenge.
Honestly, everyone was so angry about everything, which I kind of get you might be when the world's kind of half-ended, but at the same time, you'd think you'd all just rally together, but they were all just pissed off at everyone and everything, and it was just like...
Maybe the PSP was not the place for nuanced storytelling.
Well, that's the thing. But what's really annoying is, in general, the widest scope of Resistance, and this is why I kind of want to make sure I get this point clear, they do a brilliant job of providing this alt history, this sort of late 40s, early 50s history of... especially if you are, I guess, from... the area in terms of Britain, or that is in Western Europe and things, that is in, you could relate to it. They do, the cutscenes do a really, really good job, and they're always having the Resistance series of having this sort of, I guess, what you'd expect like a black and white dispatch to look like from the World War II, and it almost it looks like, you know, it's obviously not photographic real, but you can believe that these bombers are flying over these massive alien sort of like constructs and things. Like they do a magnificent job of making it believable that this could happen, or could have happened. And I know Wolfenstein kind of gets like pop for kind of doing a good job with that
doing
sort
a good
of thing.
old history thing.
And this is, I guess, no different really, and probably lesser known than the Wolfenstein sort of thing. But I would recommend people kind of, you know, if you're into that sort of thing where you're like, it sounds a bit silly, but if you're into World War II history, then it's quite fun to play this game because you kind of go, I can see how that could happen. I can see how this happens, and you know they're very accurate with the, you know, the areas and stuff of the, you know, where the missions are laid out and things like, I'm going to go to Rotterdam now and stuff, and which would make sense because like, oh, that's a bit like Operation Market Garden, and you know it's quite clever really. So to see the ham-fisted storytelling in terms of, you almost feel like there's some people in the background kind of going, oh, we've laid this deep history on top of it, and some people in the foreground going, fuck it, guns, fuck it. Cockney geezer called James Grayson is going, you fucking frog, oh, like, you know, stuff like that. It's just like, it just didn't sit like get together really.
Two sides of the development team talking to each other.
They're not in the same room clearly. Gameplay wise, it does a pretty good job. Like, as in, it genuinely does a pretty good job. I think it does a better job than Killzone Liberation, which I thought did a pretty good job anyway. And it is completely playable on the PSP, and it is completely playable on the PS4, PS5, however you want to play it on the PS Plus. Is it necessary to go back to this? Not really. Like, as in, you know what I mean? Like, as in, so, like I said, I think if you like Resistance as a series, I would recommend going back to it if you've not had it before. But if you don't, you probably won't get as much out of it, really. I only know from having those fond memories of really enjoying the trilogy on the PS3, or sorry, like I said, Game 1 and Game 2, on the PS3, I was thinking, oh, actually, this feels like just like playing Resistance. That is in, just on a bit of a more lo-fi scale. The Bend and Insomniac, both developers of the original series and also of this game, they've got a really deep, rich history of making games really fun with weapons, like Ratchet and Clank, for example, Siphon Filter and stuff. That is in, they and that's the same here in Resistance as well. There's lots of weapon variety, lots of enemy variety as well. So there's lots of fun to be had with that. Like, as in, you find many different ways that you can dispatch an enemy or a boss fight and things. That it seems as though ammo is quite, you know,
as plentiful as health.
exactly, pretty much, quite prevalent. And yeah, so all that feels pretty good, to be honest. I think that the enemy AI is a bit off. Like, as in, they just seem to move between A and B, like, as in behind a doorway and in front of the doorway, and you just kind of have to wait for them to pop out. And then, because like I say, they're quite bullet spongy, so you just sort of like wait for them to pop out and put like 60 bullets into them. And the idea is that they are meant to be these super soldier aliens, but at the same time, it does get a bit like, I was using an entire clip, and it's just like, so when you do run out of all the fun weapons, when you're just shooting machine gun bullets into something for ages, you're like, it got a bit draggy.
Does it feel a bit like a gallery?
Pretty much.
Then you're actually up against super soldiers that are thinking.
But when you have the sniper rifle that has the ability, when you hold the LB button, to slow down time, like, that's really cool. Like, as in, so I mean, and it gives you, every time you pick up a weapon, it gives you the context about why that weapon's a super weapon, for example. It's like, all right, okay. And I remember from the first game, they're always at pains to say what the cool weapons were and how they worked and stuff. Like the auger, I remember that being a weapon that was like, you know, like the best weapon in the game. So you could tell that they do some things really well and go into depth in, you know. So the gameplay, weaponry, apart from like the alien AI, I was quite impressed with, really. You know, I could see how if I'd have got this in 2009, I'd have been like, wow, this is one of the best PSP games I've played. Now, it's a good PSP game. You know, and I just think that I wasn't in love with it, as I probably clearly sound, but I think I'm probably higher on it than I sound like I am as well, like, if that makes sense. Like, so I think that they did a pretty good job of a third-person shooter on the PSP, and I think that what I'm going to give it rating-wise is playing it with dual analog sticks on PS Plus Premium now. So I'd say a 7, which I know I kind of probably... 7, is that fair? No, I think it is. I enjoyed my time with this game. There's just stuff about it that makes me feel a bit like, ugh, like, like the xenophobia and the enemy AI. But in general, if you want to go back to a PSP game, a third-person shooter, you could really do a lot, from what I've seen, a lot worse. So relatively...
I believe that.
Yeah, relatively... and I was thinking about where does this kind of sit, and I think I gave Siphon Filter Dark Mirror an 8 out of 10, and I was like, yeah, it's not as good as that, but I gave Killzone Liberation a 6 out of 10, and I was like, it's a little bit better than that, so I was like, well, that's where it probably sits then.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, it's a little bit clunky, but it looks great. Like it looks really, really good, and you can see how the team worked to try and make it sort of feel like you had integration with the PS3 at the time. Yeah, it's one of the better looking games on the system for sure. So even on the PSP and also on PS, PS Plus as well. So yeah, if you like Resistance, I'd recommend going and trying it out.
I'll tell you what I discovered the other day as well. You're talking about playing PSP games on like PS4 and stuff like that. I discovered that you could get the PSP Ridge Racer stuff on the store there, so I was like, oh yes. Now here we go.
This is the thing about that. It's good about the PS Plus Premium. I mean, the only reason I kind of got it was because it was on offer in January. I think it was like 75 quid or something like that for the year, and I was like, it feels like a lot of money, obviously, to lay out all at once. But when you think about the actual economy of it, it was, I was like, oh, this is really good. And like I think I said to you, obviously, when you really kindly donated your PS4 to me, I was like, that's great because there's loads of games I've never played in the PlayStation generation there. But then also to discover there's so many PSP games on there as well. And it is nice to kind of sometimes think, well, actually, I can have my dual analog sticks here. Like, if they've done the right thing and, I guess, ported it back from the PSP to the PlayStation. And to find out that you could stream, the 3 Resistance games. And it is really weird that they just haven't quite advertised that you... So, at no point, if you go into the PS Store, I think it is, I don't think you can buy the game. You know what I mean? Like, but for a PS exclusive that was quite big at the time... They're very shady about what they do with PlayStation 3 games in general, like it seems. Like they don't seem to do as well in terms of being careful about what they do with them.
I've long had issues with the PlayStation Store and how it highlights various bits
ever since the PlayStation TV situation.
Well, to be honest with you, yeah. And like the Vita and like how various things are there, but they're kind of buried or you have to go searching and that continued with the PS4 and stuff like that.
We should take some revenge.
Well, I feel like, we can draw a line under this one now. Jobs have been done. Business that was unfinished is now finished. And, yeah,
I genuinely, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I do feel a lot better now that
a little weight's been listed. Lifted
for some odd reason.
Yeah.
Oh, what a nice note to leave it
on.
There you go. All right, guys. Right, thanks very much for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Cheers.